and we will go ahead and kick it over to Shannon Kindle. Shannon, if you want to introduce yourself and take it away.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. As Dan said, I'm Shannon Kindle. I'm the CTU Development Director. I am based in Salida. So I just want to start off today to just let you know that I'm kind of hoping today will be more of a conversation. My presentation the presentation portion shouldn't take even half an hour maybe. So please feel free to interrupt me, ask questions whenever, and share your ideas as well. So, you know, it's been an interesting few months for sure in all of our lives and certainly around the world. You know, on March 3rd or March 5th, we had our gala, and that was the day the first cases of coronavirus were reported in Colorado. So since that time, a lot has changed in the world of being able to fundraise and hold events and all sorts of things. So, you know, we were fortunate. We had our second most successful gala ever, but obviously we got in sort of in the nick of time. Within a week of that, my kids never went back to their school, the ski areas stopped running, you know, everything kind of shut down really quickly. So a lot has changed in the last few months. Hopefully, some of this opening back up will allow us to, you know, kind of get back to doing some of the things that we want to do. But in the meantime, we've been doing some different kinds of fundraising and also, you know, just talking to a lot of people, participating in a lot of webinars about, you know, what could we do that's different, especially given the fact that, you know, we don't really know how things are going to go. You know, we've started to open up back down here, but certainly the idea that we could gather again, and, you know, the gala this year had almost 400 people. How long will it be before we can do things like that? Or even gatherings of 100. And so more and more folks are looking to do more of their fundraising in, you know, creative ways that tap into the fact that we're all often stuck on our phones or our computers or Zoom meetings like this one. And so I think it's important to kind of think about some of those ideas. So we're going to go through some ideas. I welcome your ideas as well, and please jump in. So I'm going to hopefully do the screen share thing and share my slides. And then we'll just kind of talk about it as we go through. So let's see here. All right, it says you need to let me do that, Dan.
Yeah, go ahead. I try again. You should be able to.
Perfect. All right, now where is what I want to show here? Awesome. How come I don't see what I want to show? Well, let's see how I find this. Okay, here we go. All right, so, all right, can folks see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, that's a success then. All right, so we're going to go through a handful of ideas, some of which we've tried, some of which we're just kind of considering, and you know, some of them I have chapter examples, which probably is more important to you guys, and others are just kind of things that we're hoping to share with you that you could consider. So, all right, so these are the things we're going to cover today: online auctions, raffles, business partnerships, grants, and then some sort of a catch-all for other ideas and stuff. So we'll start with online auctions. If you guys are familiar with the gala, some of you on the call have been to the gala, and hopefully most of you know what the gala is. It's CTU's largest fundraiser of the year. I don't know, we've been doing it since before my time, but we've really, in the last 4 or 5 years, built it into be a really significant source of funds for us, and also a pretty good party, I would say. We get somewhere between 350 and 400 people to attend. Like I said, our last one was on March 5th. And about 4 years ago, we switched to have a platform, an online platform. So we've been doing like a tablet style for a number of years, but about 4 years ago, we went to what was then Gesture and is now GiveSmart, which allows us basically to put all of our auction items on basically through their software on a platform, and then people can bid from wherever they are. So for us, we use it as a way to kick off our fundraising about a week before our event. We share the link to that via social media, via e-blasts. Some of our business partners help us share it. And so, you know, within literally minutes of it opening, we start to get bids. I will say for us, because our event is pretty significant in size, we still probably get 2/3 or more of the winning bids coming in that night. So we run our auction from about a week before, and we close it the night of our event. But the ability to get bids from outside the room and from people who either can't or don't want to attend an event like ours has really been helpful to us. So it's made the silent auction portion of our fundraising a lot more significant, and also just kind of changed, I think, how people think of it. When I first was a part of the gala maybe 7 or 8 years ago, a lot of people were coming to get deals, and we didn't, you know, some of our trips would go for maybe not even value, and now most of the things that we offer, at least along the like trip in the trip area, go for above value. People bid each other up. Some folks bid on the same trip, like Barbara and Mark's Bass Pond trip, every year, and they bid it up until they win it. And so, you know, we've really turned it into a place where people realize that they're coming there to support CTU, and having the ability to have people that are, you know, in Grand Junction or in Steamboat or wherever they might be bid on things that they're interested in without having to come to our event has been really helpful for us. So the platform that we use is called GiveSmart. And basically, up until last year, we had never done anything with it other than just the gala. And then last year we did a one-off, just one trip that we allowed people to bid on over the summer. And then this year we had already sort of planned to offer it to a few chapters as a way to help elevate their fundraising. We pay for the service, basically. We pay to use the technology for a year. And we pay an additional fee on top of that that actually covers for us to have staff at our event. But the technology and the platform is something that we just didn't utilize, but was available to us year round. So this year, even prior to all of this happening, we had planned on using it with a couple chapters, and or at least offering it to them so that they could try it out and see if it was beneficial, sort of at a maybe smaller scale. Obviously, this all shifted when this happened, and within a week of the gala, a chapter actually in New Mexico, the Truchas chapter, which is around Santa Fe, reached out to me and said, hey, we can't hold our fundraiser, our gala, and so what could we do? So David and I talked about it, and we said, well, you know, so basically, you know, don't ask for permission, beg for forgiveness. It's GiveSmart were to come back and say, why did you offer it to someone in New Mexico? Or, you know, you have this, you are limited by this. We'd think about that later. So far, that hasn't happened. So anyway, we offered it to the Truchas chapter, and I will show you that in a little bit later. But the idea is that we've had a chapter that used it successfully. We're working with another chapter right now. And we're also looking at using it in a couple different ways. It would have been our registration platform for Rendezvous. It still will be when we have Rendezvous in October. And we're looking at using it in a couple different ways. But basically the idea for chapters is, at least this year, until they, you know, until they say, oh, wow, you've ran too many, there's no cost to chapters. So I think that's an important factor. Basically, you know, I'm your account manager, if you will, and then it would run through me, and then we would just cut you a check. The fees are all taken off the top, and the platform's already paid for the year. So I'm going to show you some pictures just because I don't know how many people have seen it. And one of the chapters that I'm talking to right now actually thought they were going to have to create the web page. And so I think it's helpful to kind of to get a bit visual of it. So this is the main page that is obviously for the gala. You know, it's all on the platform. I just go in and add the information and stuff. It's a really powerful software. It has a lot of versatility, and I'm sure I only know 10% of how to use it correctly, but that 10% has made it a successful tool for us. So this is the main page. So this is the auction page. So each of these blocks is a different item, or if you see the ones in the top, we do a couple raffles. We do a heads or tails / scavenger hunt during the actual event. And then as you can see, we have a way to share some information about some of our top sponsors. And so this information is all the stuff that you collect ahead of time and you upload via spreadsheet and then pictures, and then it goes into basically this big package. And so we organize things by categories. So if people only want to see fishing trips, it wouldn't necessarily look like this. If they wanted to see art, they could select by that. And then there's the main page where everything is listed on there. So if you were to click on, I think I did the Southwest one, item 104, it would pop up and it would look like this. And so what happens is as people go in and register, excuse me, they make bids. And this item history part that you see there keeps on my end as a campaign admin, and keeps a running tab of all the people that are bidding. Once a person's registered for the system, they basically can put in a bid, and then they get a text when they're outbid. They can also put in a, let's say the top you wanted to spend on this trip was $800. So you could put in a bid of $800 and it would continue to bid for you, the system would, until you either were outbid or you were the winning bidder at 700 or whatever. So there's a ton of functionality in here, and people can do it from their smartphone, their tablet, their computer. Not app-based, it's a link. And so one of the cool things about it is that when you set up an online auction like this, you are able to, we would just create a unique link that actually obviously points to a URL with a bunch of letters and numbers that no one would ever remember. But it makes it really easy to advertise. So for instance, ours is, I get it confused. I think it was 2020 CTU Gala, so that every year we just add the new year, and that's what our link becomes. So we'll switch to this. So this is the chapter in Santa Fe that we partnered with. They ran their auction since they were unable to hold their event. They decided to run their auction for about 10 days. And, you know, I think that that's a great option. I think that it worked really well for them. The Headwaters chapter, which we'll talk about next, they're looking at doing it for, I think, almost 3 weeks. And so, you know, you'll have ebbs and flows. Probably when it opens, you'll get a bunch of bids. It'll slow down. You'll have to send reminders and stuff. But the Truch's chapter basically turned their event into just a virtual auction. And they had been holding their banquet for something like 15 years. And I think that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about an online auction is, I think it's a really good replacement for if you had a banquet and you can't have a banquet, it's a really good replacement for that. I think the thing about any kind of banquet and silent auction is it takes a lot of legwork to get all the items that you need. So for instance, the Truch's chapter had a committee of folks and they had already solicited all their items prior to all of this happening. So they were just kind of sitting on these things and going, what are we going to do now? So it was a perfect sort of pivot for them to put it all into this virtual auction. They were super happy with the results. They ended up making over $16,000 on it, and their normal was around $15,000. So it actually was just as successful, maybe even a little bit more than had they held their event. And that's one of the things about going virtual is if you can pull it off, you know, you don't have the cost. And for us to run the gala, it is incredibly expensive for the venue, for the food, for the AV, all those things. And so for them, they were able to make up the same level of fundraising and they didn't have the cost, you know, so it ended up being really successful. So the next one, and this is the one that we're working on right now, is the Headwaters chapter. And so they're in a little bit of a different position. You know, COVID had already hit when they hadn't even started getting items. So they're coming at it from a little bit of a different angle. And so I talked to Kirk Clanky this week and asked him and said, you know, how's that going? Because the Truch's chapter and us for the gala, we had already gotten all our items before things kind of shut down. But to go to business partners now and ask for things is different, right? And so he said, he's like, for the most part, it was going well. You know, they were kind of staying away from things that they knew, like they weren't asking restaurants for gift certificates because they hadn't been able to either be open or have in-person dining for a couple months now. So they were focusing on, you know, supporters that had been around for years that they knew were going to be able to recover. And then people who maybe hadn't taken the hit that certain industries had taken. So, you know, a little bit of tempering their expectations, I think. But they were still getting, you know, a decent amount of yeses and being able to get items. So they're going to do something different, a couple different things that I think are really interesting. So like I said, they usually have a banquet. The Headwaters chapter has a ton of support. Obviously, you know, the project up there, the Windy Gap Bypass, Fraser Flats has been a long time TU project. So there are a lot of people who are very vested who, you know, support the chapter every year at this auction. So in addition to the online auction, right now we're in the figuring out stage of how to also hold a virtual live auction, because they have some items that do really well for them, and they don't want to turn away that component of fundraising. So we're figuring that out. I'll be able to report on that after July 27th, but we're going to figure out a way to basically do a Zoom live auction, set people up with bidder numbers through the GiveSmart system, and then have people put their bidder number in the chat room of sorts. That's what we're thinking right now. So they'll be doing, like, using the platform, both the online silent auction like we've talked about, and also trying to do a live auction. And then one other thing that they're considering, which to me is a really cool idea and is a great way to support local restaurants, is they're considering doing a virtual TU banquet. So we're going to put some instant buy items on their auction site that will basically be, people can pre-order their banquet dinner from a local restaurant. We'll close that a couple days in advance so that the restaurant knows how many people. They'll be able to pick that up, and they'll all kind of, you know, in their own homes share a banquet together. But it's also a way to help a local, or maybe a couple, they haven't totally figured that out yet, local restaurants, and do some pre-order dinners, and kind of a little bit of camaraderie behind it, since they're kind of asking people to also, you know, not just bid on the online auction, but get on and do the virtual Zoom and stuff. So that's something, again, I've never heard of it before. I think it's a really cool idea. And because this platform has a bunch of different functionality, we're able to kind of set that up for them, and we'll just close that item out a few days in advance, and we'll see if it works. All right, let's see here. All right, so when you're with GiveSmart, like I was saying, there's a few different things. So you can do the silent auction, which I think is what people are used to. So it's basically, you know, how we used to have sheets of paper and write on the bids, and you'd outbid someone, write your name and number again and stuff. It's basically the same thing, it's just done online. And so for these auctions, as soon as someone wants to bid, they have to register. They can look at all the items they want until they want to bid, but as soon as they want to bid, they have to register. And because these are all online, we're requiring a credit card so that we know we've got everybody's information from the get-go. They can also just do straight donations. So there were a couple people during the Truchas auction that just made straight donations. And then, like, the instant items. So the Truchas chapter also sold their t-shirts or a donation for a t-shirt and hats through the site. And like I said, the Headwaters chapter may use the instant item for the banquet dinners. So there's a bunch of different options that is within the platform. All right, so we are fortunate to have Annie, and so we do a lot of really awesome advertising, and I think that the one thing about an online auction is it is really easy to spread the word. Like I said, we would create a unique URL for you, and then you would be able to use it in e-blasts, social media posts, hopefully business partner shares. We do some really inexpensive postcards. Ours is more to get attendance, but I've encouraged the Truchas chapter and the Headwaters chapter to consider doing that too, because, you know, obviously it's awesome that it's online, but everything's online right now. And so the idea that maybe getting a piece of mail that's pretty cheap to print and to send might just reach, you know, a handful more people that would then log on to your site. So I'm going to stop there for just a second and see if there's any questions right now. We can certainly come back to this at the end, but are there questions about sort of the online auction thing?
Shannon, this is Barbara. You know, TU National released an online fundraising platform earlier this summer also that includes silent auctions, raffles, and other things. Is there an advantage of one over the other? Have you had opportunity to look into any limitations or value added on that platform?
I have not. I did look through it, but not enough to speak on whether one is better than the other. I think this platform's great. I know there's other TU chapters / councils around the country that have used GiveSmart. But I am not familiar with the one that TU National is using. It might also be awesome. I just don't know.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anything that maybe Dan, that I should cover about this before I move on?
No, I think you can move on. We can, like you said, come back to it later.
All right, so raffles. So we have done a lot of raffles at CTU for a number of years. Annie, a couple years ago, took over as our raffle manager, and she does a fantastic job, not just with the marketing promotion side, but just the management of it. Why a raffle versus a silent auction? I think, off the top of my head, the couple things that come to mind are, one, a raffle, you can do one item, right? So if you have an amazing trip, or for instance, like what we did last year, the boat, that's a great option for a raffle. It's also a lot easier to pull together a raffle than it is a silent auction. A silent auction, if you're really going to use it as a pretty significant fundraising tool, I would say, the likelihood you'd need more items is pretty high. And it's just helpful to have at least a handful of people helping you. Not required, but certainly nice, so that you're not out there soliciting multiple items by yourself. Whereas a raffle, you could do it with one item or a few items, or like the Collegiate Peaks chapter did. In a really short amount of time, they got 12 kind of higher end items and made it a multi-ticket raffle. So I think that, a raffle requires a little less legwork. It's a little easier to get off the ground initially. And then the other thing about a raffle is that it's a lower price to entry, right? You may not want to bid up on a trip that's already above $500, but you have no problem making a $25 or $40 purchase of a raffle ticket. There's just different ways of looking at it. I think, there's more people that are going to buy a raffle ticket, are going to bid in an auction, but you're going to get, a bigger return on your auction for those items that are donated. So we're going to go through some basics, and then I'll show you some of the sort of promotion that we do. All right, so the basics, if you already know this is great. If you don't, then the Secretary of State runs raffles in the state of Colorado. In order to do a raffle, you have to have a raffle license, and you also have to have a raffle manager. And so, for instance, our Collegiate Peaks chapter just did a raffle, and they were fortunate that they had done raffles at their Caddis Festival. So they just needed to renew their license. It was expired, but they just needed to renew it. And they already had some people that were still qualified as raffle managers. It's just like I think it's an online class that you have to take that basically says, you're sort of certified to be the games manager for your organization. And you will need someone that is willing to kind of take that on. The raffle license is renewed every year. I think it's $100. It's affordable. And all of that's done through the Secretary of State. You'll need to think about your drawing date, your time, your location, and then obviously your items and your ticket price. So for instance, when Dan and I were helping the Collegiate Peaks chapter kind of set their raffle up, one of the things we talked about with them was, a $100 ticket is hard for people. And we had a lot of success with that for our boat raffle last year, but we were very specific in our marketing. We sold only 550 tickets, to make it the odds pretty good. And it was definitely the most sort of energy intensive raffle we've done. We took the boat to different locations. We were very specific in our marketing, and it turned out to be a I mean, a huge success for us. But a $100 ticket is hard. The Cutthroat chapter does a multi-prize raffle, and their tickets are $100. They often sell their tickets at membership meetings and other events. Obviously this year they're having to pivot on that and sell them virtually. But they also are in, Southwest Denver with a really large membership. I think their membership is over 1,100. So their ability to market is bigger. So we encourage the Collegiate Peaks chapter to think about doing something a little bit less. So they had a cap on their tickets, but they went with $40 ticket prices and 3 for $100. So, just things to keep in mind as you're thinking about raffles. Some of our most successful raffles outside of the boat raffle have been the 1 for 10, 3 for 25, our Gunnison Gorge raffle that we just finished up. Well, we would have finished it up at Rendezvous, but so it closed in late April. That netted over $15,000 for us, and the ticket price was 1 for 10 and 3 for 25. So, partly it's about having something that someone really wants. Great. So there is a lot. I feel like, one of the things that you have to go into raffles with is just knowledge. An online auction is about getting the items, marketing them, kind of managing the site and stuff, but there aren't a lot of back-end rules. Whereas with raffles, because they're a game and they're managed by the Secretary of State, there's just a lot of rules to pay attention to. And especially when you go online, we found that maybe it's because more people are doing them. Maybe it's just they decided to pay more attention to raffles. I don't know. But in the last year, they've certainly been a little bit more specific. So they will require screenshots and examples of all of your pages. The confirmation page, the ticket page, the initial page, all of those things have to be sent through. So it's just good to keep in mind that, you're looking at basically a 2 to 4 week process from the time you get it all set up to the time they approve it. So just kind of, that's something to keep in mind as you're thinking about how long you're going to run a raffle. The Collegiate Peaks chapter ended up having a really good or really successful raffle, but Dan and I were originally trying to get them to extend their time that pre-COVID, just to give them the ability to do it at different events in the Valley, to have more time to market it and stuff. It ended up being their raffle was really successful anyway, but the more time you give yourselves, you'll have people that we had for the boat raffle, even with the $100 tickets, we had people who bought, $500 the first time we sent out an e-blast. And then right at the end, when it was getting down to the wire, bought another couple $100. So the timing in there gives people, we'll say, the opportunity they forgot they bought a ticket and to buy a second round of tickets, or maybe they just are feeling the urgent need to have another chance at it. So you have to have a dedicated account. It cannot go into your operating account, which obviously we've been doing at the council level is easy for us. We've been doing it a lot, but just something to keep in mind at the chapter level. And then if it's over $1,000 in value, you have to have pre-approved printed tickets. All right, so some of the things about raffles, just like silent auctions, but I think that raffles kind of benefit from more frequent advertising. We are doing our final, the second boat raffle. We're doing the final promotion of that this week. And so, right towards the end of a raffle, people seem to really get excited about tickets. So you want to keep that in mind. I think, you don't want to over market to people, but it does help to, market in different ways and to remind people your raffle's still going. So every few weeks, include it in your newsletter, send out a separate e-blast, be social, right? And we had tremendous success with Annie's efforts in our Gunnison Gorge raffle. In general, most of our raffle sales come from e-blasts. The Gunnison Gorge raffle was kind of the opposite for us. She did some targeted Facebook ads that were really cheap. I think we spent between $100 and $200 total. And that, I want to say something like 60% of our ticket sales came from that. And the other thing for us on that that's really awesome is that most of those people are probably not already in our system. So we got quite a few new folks. And obviously when they buy a ticket, we keep that information. It all comes into our database. And so we have the opportunity to connect with them, to maybe bring them into the fold, or, maybe raffles are their thing and they continue to buy raffle tickets and support us in that way and stuff. So I think the thing about raffles is because, like I said, they're lower cost to entry. They're a really good thing to advertise via your Instagram or your Facebook, to do some Facebook ads. So this was our second round of the boat raffle, but obviously there's just a lot of ways to kind of to make things sort of sing. This one has a lot of information and it was on a poster and stuff. But you know, Annie's created stuff through Canva for I think it's Canva for graphics. Like I said, we've done Instagram and Facebook ads. And so there's just a lot of ways to market raffles beyond just your list. And I think that's an important component to all of these online things, is that hopefully you'll have someone that can help you, or you can reach out to us and we can kind of help you with some, you know, templates for things like this, so that you can kind of really help spread the word to an audience beyond just your chapter audience. All right, let me see where I am. Okay. All right, so any questions on raffles before we move on? All right, great. So business partnerships.
Shannon, but
oh yeah,
sorry, just a quick plug for those who are interested. Annie's going to be doing a similar kind of coffee talk on on Tuesday, the 23rd, all about kind of Facebook ads and promotion, and could be a good addition to this. Just wanted to throw it up.
No, that's great. Yeah, Annie does a fantastic job for us. So if you have the time, you should definitely listen in.
Shannon, one thing kind of on the Secretary of State side regarding raffles is you have to have a dedicated cause that your funding is going to go to. And additionally, you have to spend those funds too. They can't just sit in your account. So you know, if you don't have a license and you're looking at getting a license, those are kind of things to consider, because you can't sit on those funds. You've got to spend them.
Right. No, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. And raffle, you guys wouldn't run into this, but raffle money cannot be used for lobbying. That's not allowed, which doesn't really matter necessarily to chapters, but there's certainly different regulations. And like Barbara said, you've got to find a project to put that towards, and show that you're spending that money.
Yeah, in auctions and raffles, you cannot do alcohol. You can't be in your prizes.
Yeah, so it's not 100%. So raffles, you definitely can't raffle prizes with alcohol in it. You can have like, you know, whiskey gift baskets or whatever as a silent auction item. It just can't be a game of chance. It has to be something.
Yeah, no game of chance. Yeah, that's what I meant. Not auctions, just raffles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
sorry,
yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Barbara's point's a good one though, about selecting the cause. We have one chapter that is kind of regretting marking just youth education as their cause for their raffle, because now they have a conservation project coming up that they want to spend that money on, and they're having to go back to the Secretary of State to try and figure out if they can use that. So yeah, when you're setting up your license, you can try and give yourself some room to be flexible with that money. And then I think Annie has posted raffle guidelines on our CTU resources page with more information.
Perfect. Yeah.
Hey, Shannon, this is great. I know we're a little behind on what we thought we were going to get on the boat raffle this year. Any thoughts on why that is?
I mean, I think the second time around is harder. You know, for those that don't know, when we did our first boat raffle, we netted over $30,000 on it. And that was after some pretty significant costs, because we had to buy the boat at a discount, but it was still very expensive. And we also had to pay withholding on that, or we agreed to pay withholding. So I think, you know, doing it a second time around, it's a little bit less attractive. I don't know for sure, but I do, you know, one of the things that I think we thought or hoped we were going to get was a little bit more promotion from the Project Healing Waters side of things. And and maybe they have, and we just haven't seen big upticks from their promotion. But, you know, the idea that we were kind of sharing the proceeds, but also then, you know, tapping into their list I think was a way we were hoping it wouldn't just be our supporters seeing it for the second year in a row. It would be a different group of folks. And so I don't know if that's maybe not happened as much, or if their folks just were like, man, we're not interested in a boat. I know for sure that they had intended to sell tickets at events, and in the beginning did, like the fly fishing show, ISE, but I think that they had planned on continuing to do that through the spring, and obviously all that got shut down. So I think, you know, any of those reasons could be why. Right now, we're actually in the last week with the last couple of pushes, we're actually doing pretty well for, you know, a second time around. I mean, I don't think we had any idea that we'd do what we did last year. So there'll be one more promotion to the folks who haven't opened it yet tomorrow. And then obviously the drawing's on Monday. So. Any other questions? All right, so business partnerships. This one's kind of quick. I just wanted to touch on it. You know, it's something that we at the CTU level have been building over the last few years and kind of making more of a concerted effort to bring on business partners who support us, obviously financially, but also how do we develop good partnerships? And I think, you know, we're looking at having obviously a significant chunk of that funding not come through for the foreseeable future, because obviously some of the businesses that support us have not, either weren't allowed to be open, or we're only doing online or curbside. So we know that that is a number that's not going to be what it was a year ago. But one of the things I think we've really tried to focus on during this time is to be a good partner. And so we have been doing multiple posts a week, with each one being different business partners, just trying to, when they reopened or when they were offering online or curbside pickup or something else, just trying to kind of remind folks that these people support us. And right now is a good time to remember that they also need our support. You know, so we focused on the businesses who are obviously Colorado specific, but a lot on the fly shops, a couple Denver area restaurants that are significant supporters to us. And then just really tried to do some kind of co-promotion. And I'll show a couple of examples of that here in a minute. Another thing that I think right now you can do as you're trying to develop business partnerships in a time where maybe they don't have cash to give you, is to co-host events. As we're able to start gathering again, I think it's a great way to build a partnership, is to bring people into their store. We'll say a fly shop, for instance. Maybe you set up an after hours happy hour, and you know, it's you know, a talk by one of their guides or something like that, but you're bringing people into their store, you're partnering with them, and just, you know, kind of saying, you know, we're in it for the long haul. We know you guys care about the work we do here. You're part of the industry. How can we partner right now when, you know, you're going through kind of a tough time? And then the other thing that I think we're finding, and that we need to keep in mind, is that as we're looking to get items for auctions or raffles or whatever, that this may be the time where we have to consider covering some or all of their cost, and rather than just a straight donation, and just being mindful of the fact that, you know, a business partner that was able to give you, you know, a full day guided trip last year maybe can't give you just a straight donation, but needs you to help kind of cover some of that cost and stuff. So just being mindful of those things when we're building partnerships. I think, you know, it's really important for chapters to build business partnerships, and it's important for us as well. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. You know, local people care about the rivers in their town. They might be anglers or, you know, boaters or whatever it is. And so it's a great way for chapters to connect with people. And I think, you know, part of that partnership is just realizing that right now is when they need our promotion, and then as we build that partnership, maybe in the future it becomes where they become a bigger supporter. You know, our local chapter here, one of their folks on their board has done a really good job with building some of the partnerships with a local bank, a brewery, and some other types of folks like that locally and stuff. And I think that if you have a brewery in your town that is supportive of your work, conservation minded, maybe an angler, those are a sort of low level hanging fruit for folks. And I think that, you know, we've had great success with our brewery partnerships, and it would be something I would encourage chapters to do. So maybe it's a collaboration beer, maybe it's where you hold some of your events. Maybe it's, you know, obviously breweries are great at donating to your events and stuff, but just building partnerships like that, and kind of playing the long game. Right now it's just about maybe getting to know those people and bringing people in their door. And then in the future, maybe they're able to do something where they're willing to do a collaboration beer and 1% goes to that project or something. And so I think those are the kind of things to keep in mind. And I think, chapters should really think about how they can kind of form those partnerships in their local communities. So here's just a couple of quick examples of our some promotion we did. Like I said, we've been doing a few a week. This one was, you can't see, I obviously cut off the top, but this one was for cutthroat anglers in Silverthorne. And then this one was from Steamboat Fly Fisher. And they actually thanked us for doing that. And we've gotten that a bunch where people have seen that we've promoted them and they come back and we're like, oh, thanks so much for, telling our story or doing an Instagram share of when we reopened or whatever and stuff. So I think it's a really positive way to be a good partner. All right, so I'll quickly go through this and then Dan, feel free to chime in if you have anything. Obviously, lots of grants out there. Some of them are maybe harder to get right now, or some of them may not have the same money they thought they were gonna have, but things to consider at the chapter level, as well as the CTU level. So I just put the little brief thing up here. Dan has we have the listing of the links to these and stuff, but I'll run through these really quickly. But I think if you haven't, chapters should consider some of these grant opportunities. And one of the things I think sometimes is a little bit daunting is that, okay, I've submitted this grant or I'm considering submitting it, but there's all these deliverables and we don't have paid staff. We're a volunteer chapter. And so when Dan and I were having a conversation about this, he and I were talking about the local chapter here and how they were working on a grant that then would be run through another conservation organization here. So they would partner with another organization, an organization that has some paid staff that could kind of help to manage that grant. And so I think it's a great way to kind of reach out to other organizations in your community. And two, it's a way to sort of spread the load, right? So fishing is fun. That's a great one. I think that maybe there was only one CTU chapter that got funding from that this year, if I remember what David said. But basically, it's money to improve angling opportunities around the state, things like access, restoration, bank stabilization. GOMO grants are the CTU small grants that we give every spring. We don't often get a lot of folks from off the Front Range to apply to that, and we would love it if more chapters around the state did. They're small, just kind of seed money, but maybe it helps push you over, maybe it applies matching funds. Embrace a Stream is, hopefully you all know what Embrace a Stream is. That is National TU's matching grant program for chapters. In 2019, they gave $100,000 to 29 chapters around the country. It focuses on habitat restoration, fish passage, water quality, etc. So there's a couple more listed that I'm just going to skip over, and if Dan wants to hit them, we can. And then the other category is more just community foundations, Rotaries, banks, etc. We had a grant that did not come through, and so we started to kind of look around to see, and I was kind of surprised at the number of community foundations that would consider environmental projects in their grant making. So it wasn't just some of the things that we would necessarily think, but it was a little bit broader. So, your local community foundation might be someone you could go to. So I'm going to stop there and ask Dan if he wants to add anything to that real quick.
Sure, I'll keep it really quick. I think that was a great overview. The Western Native Trout Initiative, for folks that don't know, they're a national organization and they work on, I think, close to 30 different native trout species and salmon across the U.S. And they have two grant programs. One's a small grant. Typically that happens in the spring. It's around $2,500 to $5,000. It supports a lot of different kinds of restoration work, as well as community education programs, citizen science initiatives, that kind of thing. So if you're a chapter with native trout in your local watersheds, that's a great resource. And then they have a larger grant program that happens in the fall. And that's a great one to partner with, CPW or some other conservation organizations, even Colorado TU. if you're interested in going after one of these larger grants, we can work with you to do that. The CWCB, Colorado Water Conservation Board, Watershed Restoration Program, they have funding specific to watershed planning and restoration projects. We'll have links to all these grants on our chapter resources page. But the CWCB is going to be in pretty tight spot with the state budget this year. So we're trying to figure out how much money they're going to have to support this kind of work for their grant cycles. And those typically happen in August and in the winter. So that's all I have on those, but we'll continue to update grants as we find them on our website.
Perfect. All right, so this is sort of the end part. A few quick things on this. So the fund a need, at the gala we call it the paddle raiser, but basically I called it a fund a need because online, obviously, people aren't going to be raising their paddle, for example. So this is something we're actually going to try. We're going to use GiveSmart for it, like we said, there was a grant that we didn't get, and so we're looking to kind of come up with $9,000 for a project, and we're going to set that up as sort of like a crowdfunding page through GiveSmart. It'll have a thermometer, so people can kind of see how we're doing, and the idea is we're going to spread that link far and wide, especially via social media, and again, try and appeal to not just our base, but beyond our base. I think that's something that, if you have a specific project, it's something that you could consider doing. We've never tried it. I don't know how successful it will be, but I know in these webinars I'm sitting in, we are certainly one of many organizations trying different things like this. And the ability for people to, share the page, see it as it grows, I think is, the visual part of it is good. And so we're gonna try that out. And obviously that's an option for you guys as well, that could also be run through. It doesn't have to be run through GiveSmart. That's just what we're doing. It's an option for you guys as well. Direct appeals, obviously we do that at the CTU level. It's just something I'm tossing out there. If you aren't gonna do your event, and you have a list of folks who buy tickets or sponsor tables or whatever it is, it might be worth putting together a letter and asking for their support. The Collegiate Peaks chapter did that last year when they didn't do their Collegiate Peaks banquet. And they had some pretty good success, especially for the initial time that they'd done it. I mean, I think they would certainly call it successful. And then one of the things that I think doesn't necessarily fundraising specific, but I think is an interesting idea is, continuing to engage your community virtually, right? We can't have our normal meetings. We're all spending way too much time on Zoom. But the idea that, people you don't want them to forget about you, right? So how can you engage them virtually? And so, obviously fundraising ways to say, hey, we're still out here. We're still doing or planning on doing these great projects, support us. But maybe it's also, sharing a link to a really awesome fishing movie that you saw, or maybe it's sharing someone tying, like some of the shops do, or we've been sharing Anglers All's fly tying videos and reposting them and sharing them through our channels, because hey, you have more time on your hands, maybe fly tying is your thing. So just finding unique ways to engage with your community, even when we're not actually able to gather. So I'm going to stop there and then open it up for questions. And also if folks have tried things and they're like, hey, this really worked or it didn't work, how could we do it differently? Please feel free to raise your hand and speak up. Greg?
When I was working on that river hike project here in Silverthorne, we were getting local businessmen to donate $500 to $1,000. And I was talking to Excel Energy, and if you hadn't tapped into these local community liaison people, it's a good source. And what we figured out from talking to her that, we could write grants, but we'd already missed this year's deadline and blah, blah, blah. And I finally asked her what was her discretionary money on her corporate credit card, and she said, well, it's $500. And she said, just write me a 50-word email and I can give you my credit card number and you can have $500 tomorrow. So we worked through Shannon to get the local Excel liaison person to send CTU her credit card number, and we had it. I didn't have to write a grant, and I got it in 2 or 3 days. So like I said, a lot of these big corporations have local people that are supposed to help out the community. Tap them for their credit card, and it's easy.
Yeah, that's a great one, Greg. And that reminds me of another one. Last year at Rendezvous, Ben Bloodworth joined me for part of a presentation because he's done a really good job of building partnerships in the Grand Valley area. And they had done and Ellie, I'm sure you know all about this. They've done sorry, I'm spacing it. I think it's IF4, but anyway, one of the fishing film tours, and they had gotten a local car dealership to be sort of their keynote sponsor. And that sponsorship had kind of grown over time. And then one year he said, I just got busy and I forgot to kind of hit him up until it was only a couple weeks out. And they were kind of like, we're only going to give you 500 this year. And he was hoping for, more like 2,500. And it really was. And then the next year they came back with something like 2,500. And it was really, they wanted the promotion, they wanted to be seen as a partner. And that was one of the things that the chapter could offer, was to really show them as a valuable partner, put them on all of their marketing materials and stuff. And so, there's dealerships or banks or whatever in your local community that might love to have their name on a project or an event you're going to do and would be willing to put some significant funds into it. And really all they're asking for in return is just that recognition of like, hey, High Country Banks, or hey, Town and Country Motors or whatever supports conservation. And so, there's ways to help pay for those events, but also help develop sort of unique partnerships that are maybe outside of what you would normally think for conservation and fishing.
Yeah, sponsors definitely want to make it worth their time and money, and Grand Junction Subaru and Grand Junction Volkswagen are great partners for that. I've worked with them. Last year, I think they gave me $5,000 for Casting for Recovery, so I've already hit them up this year to be the sponsor of F3T, and I know they were excited about that, but then we had to delay. But I think you definitely need to keep in mind, banners at the events, or like you said, tagging social media or doing a specific post or something like that. So it has to be worth their time and money because funds are so short nowadays.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we've when we go after try to getting business sponsors for events, we put together like a one-pager brochure with really try to like define levels of sponsorship and then what they get for that level of sponsorship, and provide that in a cover letter of what we're supporting, what there would be supporting, so that particularly if they have to go up the chain, they have a piece of paper that is very specific about the promotion and exposure that they'll get at different levels of sponsorship.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point, Barbara. We do that with our gala, and it was something that we didn't do up until maybe the last 4 or 5 years, and we've had really good success with that. And I think you're right that it's really important, one, like you said, Ellie, to make sure that you're doing social media shares, or they've got a banner up, or whatever they're on your program, or for instance on your online auction site. And then it's good to have that kind of dialed out. Here's what you get at each level, so they kind of they know walking into it. Well, I sponsored at the $1,000 level. Here's the number of social media shares I'm getting. Here's where I'm going to be listed on their website, etc. Because that promotional part, that being linked to conservation, is important to them.
Well, interesting enough, with the Grand Junction Subaru and Volkswagen sponsorship last year that I did with Casting for Recovery, they didn't have a big chunk of money, so we developed a plan where they just gave a certain dollar amount per car that they sold. So as they sold vehicles and increased their sales, they gave us, I think it was $40 or $50 per vehicle. And that really added up. I mean, it was, almost $5,000. So just being creative too, and approaching them on how, instead of just, dipping into their, bank accounts, how we can do a co-promotion like that. And we did live Facebook feeds, and you know, they wanted that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
So,
That's a great example.
it was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that idea.
Yeah. It's fun.
So Jeannie and Jeff, you haven't been talking too much. I'm curious if your chapters are facing any challenges or trying new things as part of this.
Well, I'll talk about Denver to you. Obviously, Carp Slam is our thing, and it's October 3rd this year. And I was sent a note to all of you, and then Barbara separately, that we're trying out that new local events platform for the Carp Slam website. It seems okay. I think it's got a couple limitations, like maybe with Android phones or something. There's a couple weird little things that don't work. So, but what we're doing this year differently for Carp Slam is that we're having both the guides and the slamateurs raise money with their social media networks themselves. And we have one person, one of our women anglers has 40,000 followers on Instagram, for example. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know where that's coming from, but anyway, so we're trying to, so what I guess what I'm going to try to do this summer, this is strictly theory at the moment, is to get help them, you know, with the branding stuff that Shannon's talking about, kind of the co-branding, help them raise money with their people, you know, just but with a lot of posting, featuring the amateur, featuring the pro, and then linking that back to the projects that we're working on. So this is a completely new and different way for us this year. So don't know how it's going to go. It's definitely a COVID strategy because it's pretty much an online social media and outreach thing rather than a person-to-person thing this year. So we'll see how that goes.
And
Thanks, Jeff.
for Fort Collins, I've only been doing this since October, and we have a financial development committee just started talking about partnerships and doing these letters and trying to help that. So I'm just attending these events because I need more information, and then I can share with them and we can work as a team, because I certainly can't do it myself, and I don't, you know where the money's coming from and all of that. So it's kind of our first step.
Thanks, Jeannie.
Awesome.
All right.
Any other thoughts or questions or anything else?
One thing that St. Vrain chapter, this is a new idea that, you know, the same concept that Carp, you know, like Relay for Life, of getting participants to tap into their social network for donation, of trying actually like a cleanup event later in the summer, and tying that to individual fundraising for a cause, where people would tap into their social networks and pay $5 for, or $10 or whatever it is for, every bag of trash that you pick up, kind of thing. And so I think we're gonna try that later in the year, since like the first kind of activities that we foresee being able to do will be outdoors. To raise a lot of funds that way, but hey, we could raise a little bit and hopefully grow something like that, but build on that same kind of Relay for Life idea, where you're tapping into your social network for fundraising.
Nice.
So
Great idea.
give it a shot.
That's great. All right. Any last thoughts? I know we're just past 11 here.
And obviously, if you guys have questions or follow-up, or you want some more information on using our auction platform or raffles or anything, please feel free to reach out. Excuse me. And I think, like Dan said, we can send around the links to those grants and the raffle page too.
I do have a question. I wish there was someone from West Denver or well, Jeannie, you're on here too, and Rocky Mountain fly tying expo. What are people's expectations, for winter, the 2021 winter, of whether or not you're going to be hosting your fly tying expos? And have you thought about adopting them to some other format?
I don't have any idea what they what they plan.
That's a good question, Barbara.
Good question.
Yeah, I'm just curious if we're starting to think about it, but we haven't really. I can't say we've progressed beyond saying, well, it's too early to cancel it.
Well, that might be a good happy hour session for another month coming up here. How to transition some of these community events to a different platform.
That's a great idea, Dan. I like that idea.
Well,
I think
we're starting to scratch our head about rendezvous too. So
and it impacts rendezvous, absolutely.
Yeah, I was surprised over here. They just canceled a Colorado Mountain Wine Fest, and that's not till September, and it's an outdoor event. So I was a little bit surprised. It's one of our valley's biggest, influx of tourist money for one event.
Mm-hmm.
So although it seems like we're reopening in, baby steps, it seems like things are still getting shut down pretty far in the future.
Right. Yeah, that's our observation here in the front too, which, reading between the lines, that tells me like nobody expects large groups to be gathering for the next 6 months or more.
Right.
Well, we'll work to get through it together.
Yeah.
It's a brave new world. So.
Right. It's a great, and to change the licensing so that hosts can do virtual events. Right now you can't, but they are working, and hopefully we'll be able to transform F3T into a virtual event.
We've actually over here done a little exploration of holding F3T at our local drive-in, and we looked at that, and it turned out that it was going to be a little too expensive. We were going to co-op with Gunnison Gorge anglers, and it's kind of about a half hour north for them and about a half hour south for us, but it was pretty cost prohibitive. But we're also looking at another outdoor music venue, Las Colonias Park. I haven't gotten word that one of our members or on board of directors has a contact out there. So maybe in some of the larger areas that have more outdoor venues or drive-in theaters or things like that might be an opportunity.
Yeah, we've looked into drive-in theaters. There just aren't very many of those around anymore.
I know. Well, and it was $2,000. It was $2,000 for the venue.
That's really expensive.
And we couldn't have it on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, so it was going to be work night for people, and then adding in the drive time, and possibly if there's, if somebody has a beer, well, they didn't have a liquor license, so that was another issue, but yeah, we're trying to figure out some way to have it.
Right, good for you. Well, we'll be interested to hear how you do it, because I think there's a lot of people that want to learn from that, because we're kind of on hold on an F3T event too, and to have it and have a liquor license, have it socially distanced,
right,
and at a reasonable distance to serve our membership.
Right. Well, if you figure it out beforehand, let me know.
Okay, we'll be in touch.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for your time. Let's keep this conversation going, and thank you for everything you do for TU. We'll post these resources online and send it out. So
Thank you, Dan and Shannon, for putting this together and taking the time to prepare these materials. It's really helpful.
Yeah, thanks for all the information. I appreciate it.
Yeah, reach out if you guys have questions or interested in setting any of these up. We'd sure love to help you. So
Okay, sounds good. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
thanks, everybody.
thank you, everyone.
Bye.